revelation.
Hey everyone, welcome to today's live stream, April 21st, 2026. I have over 30 headlines to get through today. Top of the news. The Democrats are trying to establish a supermajority in the state of Virginia, home to the CIA. People don't think, why is this a big issue? Why does this apply to me? Because the establishment is reasserting its control, its dominance, not just in this country, but worldwide. We see this from the conflict. However, Trump arrived at the decision to do it. It was really against what his base wanted. But it was always a pipe dream of the neoconservatives, which are actually liberals, and the uniparty itself, which is really fronted by the Democratic Party now, is a big problem because what Americans wanted was a reestablishment of individual liberty, sovereignty, and of course, sovereignty of the nation state, the United States, as well as other states around the world. So we're going to get into this and more coming up right now. Let's read the news. We're going to start with Zero Hedge. Pakistan tensely awaits next round of talks as ceasefire deadline looms. U.S. Navy boards another vessel. Now, this is breaking news here. I tried to find some sort of corroboration about the U.S. boarding another vessel. We don't clearly have any detailed information other than here on Zero Hedge. The article goes on to say, though, neither side wants to appear weak by flying to Pakistan first without the other having already clearly committed. Iran has informed Pakistan it is sending a delegation, but still no sign or confirmation that the delegation is en route. Overnight, U.S. forces conducted a right of visit, maritime interdiction, and boarding of the stateless sanctioned MT Tiffany in Indo-Pak region. So that's Indo-Pacific region. So that is not in theater. It's Indo-Pacific, so between the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean. So that's near Malaysia, around there in Micronesia, etc. CENTCOM, and that's according to the Central Command. So they did interdict the ship. Was it a Chinese vessel? We don't know. It's stateless sanctioned vessel, so it was part of the Shadow Fleet. But there's not much going on there as far as confirmation on those reports. As just 12 ships have gone through the Strait of Hormuz in the last 24 hours, Iran claims the strait is open. It's actually closed. Iran claims one of its own made it past the U.S. naval blockade. We don't have any evidence of that either. Trump on Truth Social early Tuesday, Iran has violated the ceasefire numerous times. I'm sure they have. But they obviously fired on ships, so that's a violation of the ceasefire. Just the news. Trump on extending ceasefire. It's highly unlikely. The ceasefire with Iran is set to expire this week, and hostilities could resume after talks in Islamabad, Pakistan, failed to result in a permanent agreement. Trump told Bloomberg on Monday that it was highly unlikely he would seek to renew or extend the ceasefire. The U.S. has sought a commitment from Iran to never possess a nuclear weapon and to end its funding of proxy groups in the region and a reduction of its ballistic missile arsenal. The Iranians, in turn, have demanded that the U.S. withdraw from the Middle East. They're in no position to bargain. That's just what I look like. Tactically, strategically, they don't really have anything going for them. Maybe they do. We don't know, because if weapons have made it through the blockade, more advanced weaponry, this can prove costly, and that's exactly what the Chinese and the Russians would want, is to get the U.S. bogged down in a conflict in the Middle East. I don't think that's really going to happen. You know, I have a high regard for people like Tucker Carlson and Alex Jones. But to be honest with you, I think all their hand rigging is a little bit misplaced. You could not agree with a policy decision, but to pull all support from a political candidate because of one policy decision, I don't know anybody who ever likes every policy decision made by a politician. But the choice was Kamala Harris or Trump. You'd rather have Kamala Harris? You want Trump to be impeached, and we could maybe get Kamala Harris in there. Apparently, she's not doing anything, so she has the time. Real clear politics, real clear defense. If Iran won't deal, here's what comes next. Ceasefire expires Wednesday. Iran has fired on tankers, opened and closed the Strait of Hormuz within hours, and rejected Washington's core demands. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, not Iran's civilian government, is calling the shots, and a U.S. official confirmed this week that what the numbers have shown all along, Iran has no money, they're broke, we know it, and they know we know it. If it's true, a deal is closer than the chaos suggests, but only if Washington uses the right instruments. The air campaign produced real results. Iran's nuclear infrastructure was damaged, its navy destroyed, its proxy network disrupted. Those are all real and significant gains. The naval blockade announced after last weekend's failed Islamabad talks is cutting off 90% of Iran's seaboard trade. Yet, even as the U.S. prepares to board additionally Iran-linked Dark Fleet tankers in international waters, as they have today, the IRGC's ability to hold out remains intact because Washington has left two critical financial lifelines largely untouched, which means we have to close those. Obviously, and the question, of course, is whether or not weapons are making it into the country, because that could change everything. Thanks for joining me today. Don't forget to engage the channel, like, subscribe, leave a comment, and share the podcast. I appreciate you joining me today. All right, moving on. Next article up here is article number 4 from Fox News. Iranian officials target Trump with stark warning. But first, my favorite senator of my state of Connecticut, Democrat Senator, cheers report that Iranian ships made it past U.S. blockade. That's awesome. That's what Chris Murphy says. Chris Murphy says the United States military is enforcing a blockade against a sworn enemy, and a sitting U.S. senator says that's awesome. So what do you think is in those ships, Chris Murphy? Unfortunately, Chris Murphy, those are probably sophisticated Chinese missiles to fire at U.S. ships. So when a U.S. naval ship is sunk in the Arabian Sea or in the Persian Gulf or the Gulf of Oman, are you going to cheer awesome? Because that's basically what you cheer. Chris Murphy is really bereft at understanding what geopolitics is made up of and what the threats to the United States really are. I mean, that's really of a concern. Iran threatens new cards on battlefield as ceasefire wanes. And this is what I was just talking about. What is exactly that? What are the new cards? Iranian Parliament Speaker Mohammad Bakhdar Ghalibaf threatened to reveal new cards on the battlefield in a Monday evening social media post just days before the agreed ceasefire between the United States and Iran is set to expire. Trump, by imposing a siege and violating the ceasefire, seeks to turn this negotiating table in his own imagination into a table of surrender or to justify renewed warmongering. So if they're new cards, that means they're new weapons. If they're new weapons, that means that the weapons are very likely sent from the Chinese hold. Sorry about that. We do not accept negotiations under the shadow of threats. And in the past 2 weeks, we have prepared to reveal new cards on the battlefield. Again, the new card statement. So the new cards are obviously cards that were dealt to them by the Chinese. Could possibly be the Russians. Maybe they retrofitted a nuclear device. Maybe they were still working on it. They had time to work on it. Who knows what it's going to be? I think it's Chinese missiles. It is of great concern of what was found on that Chinese ship that was boarded by the U.S. Navy. Because if some had made it through, because it's possible that under the cover of darkness, a ship could try to skate through without being seen by satellites, without being seen by the U.S. Navy, without being detected by submarines or other submersibles. I'm sure there's got to be some sort of sonar net and or other detection devices in the Strait of Hormuz or outside the Strait of Hormuz. We'll see. But if ships did get through, they'd certainly be monitored what is pulling into Iranian ports and unloading. Are there new car? And there could also very likely be the scenario that Iran is lying. Iran warns U.S. it will not accept negotiations under the shadow of threats. The warning comes as the United States prepares for the next round of peace talks with Iran and Pakistan this week. Trump, by imposing a siege and violating the ceasefire, seeks to turn the I went through this already. We do not accept negotiations under the shadow of threats. Zero hedge, how the Iranian regime destroyed its economy long before the war. So this isn't all the West's doing. And if you look at it closely, years of ideological policymaking, institutionalized corruption, and the militarization of the economy have caused Iran's economic ruin. Iran has been in a state of permanent economic emergency since at least 2018. Official inflation has remained above 40% year after year, destroying the country's middle class. World Bank estimates show average inflation in the high 30s for most of the 2018 to 2025 period, with spikes of up to 60%, driven by massive currency depreciation, and the constant monetization of the fiscal deficits. Bad monetary policy, because they're not really concerned about money. They're concerned about building a nuclear weapon as a deterrent to allow them to fight the West, modernity, whatever. The great Satan, Israel, which seemed its fanatical aim. This is a state that prints money without restraint or underlying demand. The regime insists that the Western sanctions are primary cause of hardship. This is convenient, but also a false excuse. The Iranian regime has not fallen into economic crisis because of U.S. sanctions. It has dozens of trade agreements with the world's largest economies, India and China, and generates enormous oil income from exports of more than 1.3 million barrels a day. Plus, it's U.S. sanctions, so particularly around weapons, but Europe still trades, especially France, with Iran. The elimination of Mohammad Reza Arshifi Kahi, head of the trade at oil headquarters, exposed a multi-billion-dollar structure that financed the military activities of the Revolutionary Guard, Hamas, Hezbollah, and other armed groups using revenues from crude oil sales. Between November 2024 and November 2025, government debt to the banking system increased by 41% and debt to the central bank by 68%, forcing the authorities to monetize the deficits, of course. Over the same period, commercial banks increased their borrowing from the central bank by 63%, flooding the economy with worthless local currency, the rial. Official sources cited by the Oil Exporters Association report $47 billion in crude oil and gas export revenues in 2025. What happens to all that money? They're mismanaging all that $47 billion because it's not enough for their military buildup. And really to maintain the regime, because all the soldiers and all these folks get paid. Because that's how juntas stay in power. You have military people getting paid because that's the job, and everybody wants to go to work for the state because that's the only organization that has money, because they want to survive. And so as long as everybody in working for the state gets paid, they can oppress their population and fight global adversaries, etc. National Review headline number 7 here. The blockade is scrambling calculations in Tehran and Beijing. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps appears to be attempting to seize control of the regime from the Iranian political figures. So what the headline suggests here is that the calculations for particularly communist China and all the investment they put in there and in Tehran. So the only linchpin here on the regime's survival is clandestine weapons shipments from Beijing, advanced weapons that can counter the U.S. military or attempt to do so if it makes it into Iran. So who knows? The Russian scientists, nuclear scientists, have been removed purportedly. Now, whether Beijing is sending in scientists or other military advisors, we don't know. I don't think they're ready to do this right now, and that's what the evidence has shown, that the communists in Beijing don't have the stomach to go to war with the United States over Iran. But who knows? They might. Fox News, headline number 8, Iran's Revolutionary Guard sidelines president as military grip expands. The president, Pezeshkian, reportedly unable to contact Supreme Leader Muqtada Khomeini as military council controls access. So the IRGC is in full command of the country. As I said this already several weeks ago, that Iran is now a military junta. First of all, the religious civilian leadership was a facade to begin with. This was always a military junta with fanatical, ideological Islamic fanatics in charge of a great military arsenal. That should have been dealt with a long ago, but no one really had the stomach for this except for Trump. Iran's IRGC, the elite branch of the Iranian armed forces, has blocked President Masoud Pezeshkian's presidential appointments and erected what sources described as a security cordon around the supreme leader. The IRGC effectively has assumed control over the key state functions. It was always a matter of when, not if, the IRGC was going to step forward, even before this is than it has in the last 3 decades. Basically, what we're looking at here is the facade of religious and civilian leadership in Iran is being swept away. It never really existed other than in some sort of vestigial form. Zero Hedge, the International Maritime Organization, draws up Hormuz evacuation plan for 800 ships trapped in the Gulf. The ships aren't going to be rescued. It's the personnel. Bloomberg quoted the Secretary General of the IMO, Arsenio Dominguez, who stated on the sidelines of the Singapore Maritime Week earlier today that the IMO is preparing a humanitarian evacuation of 800 ships stranded in the Persian Gulf after a nearly 2-month conflict. So they're not going to airlift out giant ships. They're going to evacuate the crews. This is about seafarers. This is about the people, Dominguez said, because if we actually start looking into the cargo, the values, the commodities, etc., then this is not going to work. The decision of the council was very clear. It's a humanitarian corridor to evacuate the seafarers from the region. Now, are they talking about appealing to the Iranian government to allow the staff to be evacuated, the staff of these ships? Maybe. Um, I don't see this going on for much longer. There's something has to be dealt with. As far as the uranium is concerned, I don't think trying to rescue that should be a U.S. objective. I think it should be an Israeli objective. However, I think Israeli commandos should be sent in if they want to secure it, not U.S. forces. But I do think U.S. forces and the U.S. Navy and or Air Force have the power, wherewithal, and will to open up the Hormuz Strait. What does that mean? That means interdicting missiles. Not the gunboats that shoot machine guns at ships. I'm talking about the missiles that are fired from small boat platforms and or the cliffs of the Hormuz Strait. How that can be done, I think we unleash hell. The B-52 bombers bombing the crap out of the ridges there above the Hormuz Strait. It depends on what kind of intelligence you have. I mean, sometimes people feel that, oh, the United States satellites can see everything and we have so much intelligence. Do we really? You could still hide from satellites, as the Ukraine war has shown. Politico says Iran war accelerates America's breakup with the world. This is story number 10. Indeed, it has, but don't forget, this is Politico, so this is the CIA, and the CIA says the Iran war is damaging America's influence around the world and exacerbating tensions with countries already whipsawed by President Donald Trump's second term, an erosion of power that could be tough to reverse a U.S. adversary such as China's, as U.S. adversaries such as China take advantage. Do they really? Are they really taking advantage? See, this is the CIA that put Mao into power in the first place. Trump is devastating the Chinese. Right? With Venezuela, the first move on the chessboard, and now Iran. From Bangladesh to Slovenia, fuel rationing has throttled transportation, frustrating leaders dealing with the fallout of a war they did not want. In Muslim-majority countries, anti-U.S. narratives are flooding the airwaves, often with tacit permission from governments. Even America's allies in NATO have limited their help to the U.S., with some stressing the Trump administration did not consult them before launching the fight with Iran. This is typical from the CIA. And this is the establishment narrative. And what I'm going to try to demonstrate here today is that the establishment, the Empire Strikes Back, the establishment is reasserting its control over the United States, over the world, when Trump isn't even halfway through his term. So everybody was dancing and singing when Trump got elected that the New World Order is dead. The New World Order is dead. The New World Order is not dead. It wasn't even on life support. What they looked like is what many people do when they face a formidable foe, is a lot of times they'll shrink back, reconstitute, and then lash out tactically, smartly, covertly. And that's exactly what they're doing. So they set their target on two things. Internationally, on Hungary. Mostly that was spearheaded by the European Union and van der Leyen. And Virginia in the United States, which was spearheaded by a CIA officer campaigning as a moderate, which would work very well in a blue dog state like Virginia, and then do the switcheroo when she gets into power, which is exactly what she did. And now with this redistricting and the midterms coming up, is it's sure to turn into a supermajority, like my state is a supermajority, never return to any Republican control. Because to be honest with you, the Glenn Youngkin election threw the establishment off as well. They were concentrating on Trump, and all of a sudden Youngkin got in there, and it was mostly because of what was happening with Ralph Northam. And That little wrinkle in there. Fairfax, his lieutenant governor. What happened there? Why did all of a sudden the Democrat machine want to bury him? Was he campaigning on a moderate platform? Maybe. Headline number 11. Just the news. Trump urges Virginians to oppose redistricting plans in the last minute pitch to tell a rally. This referendum is a blatant bipartisan power grab that nobody's really ever seen anything like it, Trump said in a tele-rally call with House Speaker Mike Johnson. It's a liberal extremist Governor Abigail Spanberger, too bad, and the far-left Democrats in Richmond after Spanberger promised Virginia voters that she would never do this. But she works for the CIA, and what does the CIA do? Lie. There's no truth. There's only narrative, if you know anything about intelligence. And I don't mean psychological and mental intelligence. I mean the intelligence networks of spy agencies who only deal in narrative, because they're all postmodern and they're educated in postmodernism, and they know that subjectivism is your truth. And so they try to convince you of what your truth should be versus understanding an objective truth, which all ideas meet in the middle, not necessarily in the middle, but meet somewhere in between to figure out what the real truth is. Fox News, story number 12, GOP blasts Virginia amendment as maps could swing delegation to 10-1 Democratic advantage. Governor Spanberger says the effort responds to the Republican-led gerrymandering in other states like Texas. What the Republicans were trying to do was to reset the gerrymander. Now, everybody gerrymandered, and it's constitutionally allowed to gerrymander because congressional seats are always in flux, etc. And the founders knew this. However, the Supreme Court ruled that drawing districts based on race is unconstitutional, and that's what the Democrats have done. Taken Republican districts and drawn in really lower income, so they could spell it out as lower income, but we know it's blacks that traditionally vote Democrat, and draw Republican districts into previously Democrat districts, siphoning off some of that vote and put it in conservative districts so they won't be conservative anymore. Also related, another Fox News article, Soros-linked dark money network fuels Virginia redistricting push backed by national Democrats. It's not just backed by national Democrats. Primary backer of Virginia's redistricting effort raised more than $64 million via dark money groups and support for national Dems like Nancy Pelosi. Support from national Democrats like Nancy. I mean, that has nothing to do with what we're talking about here. What we're talking about is, and we're going to find out more in places like Act Blue, that the dark money funding is not just from national groups. And these national groups, these national NGOs, raise money from foreign groups. And it's not disclosed. And we're going to get into Act Blue in just a second so we can corroborate those facts. Virginians for Fair Elections, a main group fighting to get Virginia voters to approve a ballot referendum that will allow the state to redraw its congressional maps, has been pumped with millions in cash from a web of George Soros-backed dark money groups and top Democrat Party officials. The money the group has garnered ahead of Tuesday's vote, which is poised to allow Democrats in the House of Representatives to potentially take 4 seats from Republicans going into the midterms, also comes from leading Democrat Party figures and organizations like Nancy Pelosi and the American Federation of Teachers. Why is the American Federation of Teachers, a teachers union, supporting a supermajority in Virginia? Well, it's the nail in the coffin. See, what a supermajority is basically a nail in the coffin for Republicans in that state. And even if some vestigial seats are kept or given to Republicans, like in California, it doesn't really matter, because what the majority of the Democrats in that state then do is make it impossible for Republicans to ever regain a majority again. And that happened in my state as well. You do things like you keep mail-in ballots, etc. You change voting rules and voting times and whatever you could do to get an unfair advantage and to hold that advantage. More from Fox News, story number 14, Republicans sound alarm and Democrats power grab as Virginia votes on redistricting shakeup. Trump and House Speaker Mike Johnson urge voters to defeat the measure on the eve of the election. That's today. It's a shame. But see, the thing is, when you're thinking tactically, you have to find your wedge. A wedge that will allow you to do more. And that's why they centered on Virginia. They were thinking about Georgia, and then they abandoned, especially when the DOJ went into Georgia, they abandoned that and they go, we have to go full into Virginia. And then they got the CIA spook in there. And she was going to do everything the establishment wants. And so she posed as a moderate, got elected as a moderate, and then went full left. And then that allows the spigot of money to start flowing, because if you're just a moderate Democrat and you still believe in individual liberties and sovereignties of nation states and normal things and responsible monetary policy, you're not going to be allowed, because everybody on the left wants to go full left. It's a revolution of sorts. Post Millennial has this headline, story number 15, Iraq-born U.S. citizen sentenced to 25 years for ISIS recruitment. Federal prosecutors say al-Safu was a leader of a Kataib Media Foundation, a sophisticated pro-ISIS media operation that operated across social media platforms. That brings us to our next article. Just the news. Texas Representative Chip Roy files bill to denaturalize, deport Islamists and Marxists. I think that's fair. The measures against Marxism's dangerous adherents and noxious Islamists, the Mamdani Act, would amend the Immigration and Nationality, what used to be Naturalization, Act to limit alien eligibility for admission and naturalization and enable deportation and denaturalization for any membership, affiliation, or advocacy of socialist, communist, Chinese communist, Marxist, or Islamic fundamentalist doctrines, or for other purposes. It shouldn't say Chinese communist. Why didn't they just say Maoist? But that's straight from the bill, which I support. The problem is because fundamentally, communism, socialism is at odds with the founding document of the United States. It's all about, the Bill of Rights is all about individualism. This whole country was about individualism and non-interference of government, of the national government, whatever it was, in people's lives. Socialism is just the opposite. And of course, an Islamic fundamentalist thing is also because Muslims believe there's a connection between the religion and politics. And so that's also anti-American. It's not like the core beliefs of the Quran may or may not be conducive to what's happening in America, but socialist doctrine certainly is. And that's not just historical, it's right in the document. Like I said, the opposite of socialism is individualism. And this country, the Constitution, is based on individualism. That's what the right is. The right isn't Hitler. The right isn't fascism. The reason fascism is on the right is because instead of a unified one-party state, you have different pillars of power that work together to be authoritarian, essentially. But single-party unified state apparatus is just as authoritarian as the fascist system. I mean, technically the communists are fascists because they still work with corporations. The difference in a communist state is that the state holds a controlling share of any corporation that operates within their territory. Which brings us to our next article, Fox News, story number 17. Chinese national arrested at JFK for allegedly photographing U.S. military aircraft at Nebraska base. Authorities say Tianru Liang, 21, also planned to travel to Oklahoma to photograph aircraft at another installation. It's alleged, though. It's not like the Chinese communists actually flew a spy balloon directly over our ICBM fields, and that was allowed by Joe Biden. It's not like that happened. It's not like Chinese nationals were actually smuggling pathogens both in and out of the country, right? It's not like Chinese nationals haven't conducted influence and honeypot operations and spying operations on our politicians. It's not like that was going on. It's not like the communist Chinese are selling advanced military equipment to our adversaries in the Middle East. And I have nothing against the Chinese people. It's just communism is... A Chinese national was arrested at... Well, the thing with socialism is it is controlled opposition for the rich. And it's a way for the rich to have an authoritarian system because democracy won't allow for that. Because no one's going to vote for authoritarian system. But once you vote for socialist, you'll never vote for socialist again because they won't allow voting, period. Okay. Chinese national was arrested at JFK in New York. And federal authorities said he photographed sensitive military aircraft near Offutt Air Force Base in Nebraska and planned to target another installation as he prepared to leave the country. Tianru Liang, 21, is accused of violating a federal law that restricts photographing defense installations without authorization. Authorities say Liang was taken into custody on April 7th while attempting to board an international flight just days after a warrant was issued in Nebraska. I'm sure he heard about it. And then the case centers on activity near Offutt Air Force Base, home to U.S. Strategic Command. Again, that's where they're the ones that decide to where and it's the B-52s and B-1 bombers that fly out of that base. So before there was a satellite balloon flying over our ICBM fields, and now there's a guy photographing where the strategic bombers fly out of. Oh yeah, and there was just it was a few months ago that 2 Chinese nationals were trying to fly a drone over another U.S. Air Force base in California. Oh yeah, and there was another Chinese national that was trying to gain access to another defense base. No, but they're not our enemy. Just let all Chinese nationals move freely about the country, even though we know the Chinese nationals are required to spy for the Chinese Communist Party. Back to my state of Connecticut, the Connecticut Mirror, GOP protest display of GOP protest display of tiny Pakistani flag on Connecticut lawmaker's desk. It's not tiny, it was regular size, a desk flag. You know what a desk flag is? They're like this big. Not tiny. Tiny flag would be like this or like your lapel pin. Small yellow Gadsden flags blossomed like late daffodils Monday on the desks of 18 Republicans in the House of Representatives. Not a complaint of Connecticut's uncertain spring, but a rebuke to a Muslim colleague born in Pakistan, Representative Mariam Khan, a Democrat from Windsor. On Khan's desk in the third row, 3 off the center aisle of the House, the tiny U.S. flag displayed on most desks since the attack on U.S. on September 11, 2001 had disappeared. In its place was a flag of Pakistan, a green banner with a crescent and star symbolizing its founding as a Muslim homeland. First of all, in Connecticut and in most states, the condominium laws are you can display seasonal flags, but they can't be permanent. The only permanent flag displays that are allowed in Connecticut are the United States flag and the flag of Connecticut, the state flag. I don't know why someone who's a U.S. citizen, who was born in Pakistan, it doesn't say she's a Muslim colleague born in Pakistan. So is she even a U.S. citizen? I don't think you have to be a U.S. citizen to hold office in Connecticut. You should, but in any case, you're a U.S. resident. You're representing you're representing state government. So you're representing the state of Connecticut, and you're representing the United States in some capacity. I don't think that should be allowed. You want to fly it outside of your house? You have perfect right to fly something on your private property. You can fly whatever flag you want. I have no problem with that. But when you're sitting in the halls of state Congress and you have another nation's flag on your desk, and the thing was, now she has both flags on her desk. So she has the American flag and the Pakistani flag. But she had replaced the American flag with the Pakistani flag, and that's why. And she said, I displayed the Pakistani flag as a reflection of my heritage and personal pride. Pakistan is a long-standing diplomatic partner of the United States, and also of China. Does not diminish commitment to this country or serving the people of Connecticut. I disagree. I think that is no place. No place. And I have nothing against Pakistan or Pakistanis, or if you want to wear your hijab or whatever. You want to have that bumper sticker on your car? I don't care. It's the same thing if you were going to work, right? You're not allowed to wear I couldn't wear a Trump hat when I went to work. And I don't think this is her. Is this her? Because she's now in front of her desk. And there she's got the American flag there. And you can see some of the other folks have the Gadsden flag. Good for them. I'm just sick and tired of this because you're representing the state and you're representing the United States and our way of life, not Pakistani way of life, not Muslim way of life. And like I said before, the problem is with the Muslim community, they don't see a division between their religion and politics. You could ask them. And then this funny, they go on, and the Connecticut Mirror is pretty liberal. One legislator of Greek descent had a Greek flag. Irish flags have been known to appear around St. Patrick's Day. House Majority Leader Jason Rojas, the first Latino in top leadership ranks, has a flag of the U.S., Connecticut, and Puerto Rico. Well, Puerto Rico is an American territory. So that's different. Pakistan, the ISI works against and has worked against American troops in Afghanistan. It works closely with Chinese intelligence. Pakistan is not our friend. I mean, diplomatically, yes, they're our friend. But I mean, as I stated previously, Pakistan, the ISI, were the ones that put the Taliban in power in Afghanistan in the first place. All right, going to more unpatriotic behavior. Media item, sorry for misleading the people. Tucker Carlson delivers jaw-dropping mea culpa for endorsing Trump. I think they'll come around. I think Alex Jones will come around. I could understand, like I said in the beginning, I understand you not supporting a policy decision. But don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Now it's all like, what happened to Trump? What happened to Trump? He decided to attack Iran, which all presidents and administrations have the right to do. I'm not defending the decision. I don't support the decision. But I'm not like, fuck Trump now for attacking Iran. He might have been given faulty intelligence by Israel. But what I was looking at here is specifically after the Maduro incident, what China was doing as far as sending sophisticated missiles to Iran to further their ability to restrict movement in and out of the Persian Gulf. We're just doing it, cleaning it up now is going to be a lot easier than cleaning it up after. Whether they, in this 2-week period, whether they received those sophisticated YJ-12Bs, we'll see. The problem is we haven't gotten any evidence of what type of missiles are being fired because they're called projectiles in the media. What was it, a catapult? Was it an arrow? A trebuchet? It's a missile. Moving on to Just the News, article number 20, satire website The Onion reaches new deal to lease Alex Jones InfoWars. The satirical news outlet The Onion reached a new deal Monday with Alex Jones InfoWars to lease the company after a judge blocked the news outlet from purchasing the website a couple years ago. Jones was forced to liquidate his assets that included the website after he declared bankruptcy because he was ordered to pay nearly $1.5 billion to relatives of victims of Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting in Newtown, Connecticut. Why? Was the Lanza family sued for $1 billion? They were actually, if anything, they held responsibility for the shooting, the death of their supposed death of their children. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole. But to think that somebody that publicly commented on a heinous crime, supposedly heinous crime, that they could be awarded $1.5 billion for defamation, pain, and suffering because Alex Jones said, looked like, especially, what's his name? Robbie. Was the guy that was laughing on CNN. In any case, it doesn't matter. You could comment on anything you want. It's called free speech. The problem was it was filled with a bunch of different shit, right? Where I live, supposedly some guy was confronting relatives of survivors and said to them, your children didn't really die. That person was named. He didn't have any affiliation to Alex Jones. Alex Jones called an FBI agent a sloppy sniper because he was carrying his rifle by the friggin' magazine. Who does that? This is an FBI agent. You've never held a weapon before? Carrying his rifle by the detachable magazine. And he happened to look like one of the parents. And he was dressed all in SWAT outfit, except he didn't have any designation, and he was carrying his rifle and stuff. And supposedly this is this FBI agent. I mean, come on, the whole thing friggin' stinks. But anyway, to be, couple hundred million, okay. Tens of millions, okay. 1.5 billion, come on. And now we have this. They don't want the money. They just want InfoWars to go out of business. Why do you think that is? Because they shed light on something that was fishy. But the problem I have with Alex Jones lately is he's with Tucker Carlson. It's like, Israel got to Trump and blah, blah, blah. And now he attacked Iran. And I'm not for that policy decision, but it's the same thing with Israel behind Charlie Kirk's killing. How? It's so speculative. You don't know. Now, did Netanyahu try to convince Trump to attack? Sure. Did they bring them intelligence that was maybe questionable? Maybe. Did the Israelis get into news services and publish the story about the Chinese supersonic missiles going into Iran? Maybe. But realistically, everybody knows the IAEA and everybody knows that Iran, right, had enriched their uranium to 60%. Another couple weeks of enrichment, that would have bring it to 90%. That's weapons grade. And then maybe a month or two from there to build a nuclear warhead. The problem is that the Chinese supersonic missiles would keep the U.S. Navy at bay, and there would be no way to strike Iran without the assistance of aircraft carriers. You understand? So that would protect their ability to build a nuclear bomb and prevent the United States from striking into Iran. Only land-based Air Force would be used, and the problem is then you know where they're coming from. In any case, I'm sorry I went off on that. What we wanted this whole time, what we have not backed down at any moment, it's been 8 years and 3 days since the Sandy Hook families initially filed the lawsuit. They have not received a fucking penny, nor should they ever, as far as I'm concerned. For pain and suffering from some conspiracy theorist with a radio show in Texas. It wasn't even on the television. We're excited to get them immediate pennies from some merch sales, but also longer-term pennies once we wind up eventually straight up buying this thing, because they're just leased it right now. And they're going to sell merch. No one's going to watch that fucking show, The New InfoWars. The New InfoWars website will function as a digital platform and comedy network led by creative director Tim Heidegger and offer a platform for new comedians who parody social media influencers and media figures. Who do you think they're going to parody? Alex Jones. They're going to make it a fake Alex Jones and say the parody that they're doing of Alex Jones is actually what Alex Jones was. It's the same thing that Colbert did when he still had the Colbert Report. He was, or whatever his show, he was parodying Alex Jones. I mean, come on. Alex Jones is right. You don't believe in conspiracies? You don't think there are conspiracies out there? Was there a conspiracy in Virginia? Is there a conspiracy tied to the communists in China? Is socialism a conspiracy? Is it controlled opposition? Speaking of conspiracies, Washington Times, wild conspiracy theories about Charlie Kirk killing a boon. Excuse me, let me read that again. Wild conspiracy theories about Charlie Kirk killing a boon for accused shooter's defense. Of course it is. Despite the damning images and reams of additional evidence, the prosecutors say tie Mr. Robinson to the September 10th, 2025's assassination, including DNA samples and multiple confessions. Wild conspiracy theories about who killed the conservative influencer have proliferated on social media. The host of alternative theories about what normally would be a slam dunk criminal case has created an opportunity for the defense team to try to cast doubt, and that's all they have to do, among the pool of jurors as to whether Mr. Robinson killed Kirk. And there's no evidence to suggest it was a conspiracy. What is Egyptian planes? Trapdoors? Come on. One shot, one hit. You can hear the report. It was from a distance. It sounded like a .30 caliber rifle. You can argue all you want about the bullet that fragmented, what it was. It could have been a home load. You know, the guy loaded it himself, maybe with reduced power. Who knows? But because of the ballistics, you're claiming because of the ballistics that it wasn't this guy, it wasn't that weapon. Sorry. And I'm a conspiracy theorist, but I have to have evidence that there's a conspiracy. Let's say with maybe the shooting of school children, and you're not going to show me any evidence that the crime actually was committed. And it's not, I'm not sick because I want to see evidence. You don't have to show any evidence that a crime was committed. I mean, the crime that you say, that you purport happened. And I'm not even denying that it didn't happen, but to show no evidence, no picture of the dead gunman, Because the thing happened with Sandy Hook is the assistant medical examiner went, or actually her husband, took pictures of Adam Lanza. There was a big blow up about it in the news, at least locally. And that person was suspended and they were gagged. And the evidence was seized, the pictures they had of supposed Adam Lanza's body. And that's what Carver meant when he said, we have really good photographers. He was getting an insurance policy, but he ended up dead anyway. A year later, he was dead. Like, they'll never kill somebody right away. They'll wait like a year. Like, look at Tim Russert, right? He was the newsman who head up Meet the Press. And he asked both presidential candidates, George W. Bush and John Kerry, if they were bonesmen. They belonged to the Skull and Bones Club from Yale. And a year after that, he was dead, again, of a heart attack. Post-millennial, I did want to get into this briefly. Labor Secretary Lori Chavez DeRemer resigns amid an investigation into affair family scandals. She was accused of abusing her position to pursue inappropriate relationship with a subordinate, and reports that her husband had been banned from the Department of Labor's headquarters over allegations of sexual assault against female staffers. So both her and her husband were philanderers, and specifically using the workplace to recruit lovers. So yeah, that's ethically not supportable. The House Judiciary site on X says Act Blue employees take the fifth when asked about foreign fraud and whistleblower retaliation at the Democrat donation platform, which is Act Blue. So there's evidence now that Act Blue was raising money from foreign sources. And we know also that George Soros does the same. Not surprising. New York Times, Act Blue may have misled Congress on vetting foreign donations, its lawyers warned. The point is they pleaded the fifth and whatnot, but the point is that they weakened the vetting process for foreign donors before the 2020 election and subsequent election. Fox News, story number 24, indicted Democrat Sheila Sheriffless McCormick refuses to resign as expulsion vote looms. She said she will not resign. This is not the time to abandon the district. Famous last words. Sounds like the Iranians. What did she do? She was found guilty of more than 24 ethics violations involving financial misconduct during a rare House ethics trial in March. She had denied any wrongdoing and is facing a separate criminal charge after being indicted by the federal grand jury last year. The ethics verdict centered on a charge that McCormick funneled more than $5 million in disaster relief to her campaign and was improperly paid to her family's healthcare company. Holy shit. The point is, she did not try to return the money, which amounted to more than 100 times what the government owed the family-run company. 100 times more. And she said, I'm not resigning because this is where I make my money. Can't stand people. And then they're caught, you know? And then they're caught and they're like, I didn't do anything. You just got caught. I've seen it in my career, 30-year career as a journalist, time and time and time and time again. People get into positions of power and power over the financial workings of whatever institution they're head of. They misappropriate money. Then they're found out, they deny any wrongdoing. Then they're convicted, they still deny any wrongdoing. And then they refuse to step down of their prestigious post that was entrusted to them, that they don't do shit like they did. when you're trusted into a position of power, the responsibility is great. And any ethical issue that arises, you should immediately step down. Sorry about that. I just get mad. Justice Jackson takes aim at fellow justices and results aren't pretty. So there's a case that was in front of the Supreme Court. And if anybody knows anything about law enforcement, you'll know about reasonable suspicion. The officer receiving a radio dispatch call regarding a suspicious vehicle. The officer seen two people flee from the vehicle, and it was parked in an abandoned parking lot at 2 a.m. As the officers approached the car, it began backing out of the parking space while the rear driver's side door was still open. And Jackson said it lacked reasonable, articulable suspicion sufficiently to justify the seizure. What a bunch of shit. Have you ever done a ride along, Jackson? Why? Because the kids were black? Is that why you don't want? I mean, this is suspicious. Suspicious is suspicious. It doesn't have to be justified. Suspicious is suspicious. It's 2 a.m. and people are sitting in a parking lot of a closed business in the back, right? Where they're not supposed to be, probably to do drugs or whatever. That's their right. You know, if you ask me, if the car is parked at a park or somewhere else, then maybe they should be left alone, but it depends if they're on private property or not. In any case, when they approached the vehicle, two people fled. That's suspicious. So even if there was no suspicion before, it's 2 a.m. This justifying criminal behavior. And you're like, oh, there wasn't any criminal about that. With that. Well, there wasn't. But if they ran from police, this idea that, oh, they're scared. Come on. I can't. If you're out at 2 a.m, parked in a car somewhere where you're not supposed to be, and then you're running away from police, and, you know, I believe in the liberalization of drug use. So because I don't think that should be the reason to run from police. But anyway, let's move on. Just the news. Majority believe government officials broke the law to force Trump Ukraine impeachment. Of course they did. Majority of voters, 52% of likely voters, expressed the view that the latest Rasmussen poll, including 36% who said it was very likely, a further 20% said it was not at all likely, and 12% said they were unsure. And it's a margin of error of 3%, which is kind of high. But officials broke the law to falsely create an impression of wrongdoing by President Donald Trump to force the Ukraine impeachment. Of course, it's wrongdoing after wrongdoing after wrongdoing. If it isn't the Sheffield McCormick person, then it's this, or Judge Jackson, or we could go on and on and on about the malfeasance that's being committed. And then when people are caught, they're like, I didn't do anything. And some of it, sure enough, like Eric Swalwell, that was a honeypot. I believe he had consensual sex with those women, and then they were held aside to come out at a later date to ruin him if needed. But his philandering, he slept with a Chinese spy, so he should have been removed for that. Just the news, U.S. Intel secretly flagged major 2020 election vulnerabilities, including voter data, memo shows, but the warning that adversaries had the capability to compromise America's voting infrastructure raised specific concerns about the vulnerability of voter registration databases that later would be penetrated by China and Iran, a newly declassified memo obtained by Just the News shows. National Intelligence Council concerns were so extensive that officials personally briefed President Donald Trump at the White House in February 2020, according to photos just obtained by the news. CIA, FBI, and Homeland Security officials joining with the NSA analysts to inform the president. And that's why I said it was rigged. And it was rigged. But you have to understand the conspiracy is not just a Democrat conspiracy. It's a Democrat with neoconservatives, the Uniparty, conspiring with the WEF elite and communist China to undermine the sovereignty of the United States, to supplant the United States as a hegemonic power, because the United States still represents its constitutional founding, which says individuals have certain inherent rights endowed by their creator. The Federalist. Majority of voters want the Save America Act passed before the midterms, poll finds. Taps-Harris poll found. Majority of voters believe this should be done. Nearly 60% of respondents want the Save America Act passed into law before the midterms. Well, of course. Thune and other Rhino senators have only continued to slow walk the legislation throughout the past months. Of course they have. Thune is a neocon Rhino, part of the establishment. He's in the Mitch McConnell camp, and we know that. PJ Media has the headline, "Nuking the filibuster may be the GOP's only play." And this is based on what James Carville said, because what he's saying the private part out loud. Carville isn't promising ordinary politics. He's promising when the Democrats return to power, they will use that power to reshape the courts and lock in an advantage that will be nearly impossible for Republicans to overcome. They are planning to ensure a Democrat supermajority in federal government forevermore. So basically the same thing they did in California and Connecticut and now in Virginia and to some extent Illinois, they are going to do to the federal government. This is the last chance, folks. So if anybody's out there still sitting on the fence wondering about what to do, and you could be liberal. I'm not saying you can't be liberal. In a fiscal sense, you think we should spend government money on social programs? Okay, I can agree with you on that. The progressive stuff, not so much. But you don't understand the real bill here is the New World Order. There's a technocracy, the financial elites, corporations will use the blueprint of Chinese communism to institute a world government and will be dictated that way. People will be given universal basic income and then phased out. Fox News, article number 30, nonprofit network takes hundreds of millions in federal funds while pushing wokeness, advocacy group warns. The American Parents Coalition report highlighted examples of NASEM allegedly pushing politics. What is NASEM? In a recent report, APC compiled a litany of examples, according to the organization, that demonstrates that NASEM pushing of politics throughout funding. The NASEM, according to APC reports, funding organization promotes a specific climate agenda. So what NASEM is, it's an education organization that was created, and I'll get to that in just a second. But they're also pushing climate agenda and environmental justice. Let me get to the rest here. Students discover how they can help dismantle and counteract damage caused by systemic racism, and one of the group's worksheets includes examples of equality, equity, and liberation. In 2025, NASEM had published a report, Equity in K-12 STEM Education, Framing Decisions for the Future. A myriad of other factors, reducing gaps between groups, embracing heterogeneity, expanding opportunity access, learning and using STEM to promote justice and envisioning sustainable futures through STEM. So NASEM was a foundation actually put into place in the 19th century by Lincoln. And it was a way to promote science in schools. I'm missing that page somehow. Don't have time to find it now, but I thought I had that page that said what NASEM was. It's like I said, it was a educational foundation promoting science that was put into place at the time of Lincoln in the 19th century. But now it's become another, as all educational programs have, a bastion of progressivism. Time magazine says when no one was looking, Ohio became a swing state again. So I guess Sherrod Brown is back. He was going to get back in Ohio politics. He was unelected last time around. And I hope Vivek Ramaswamy has something to do with that, getting the Republicans back on track. But it's like any other state, the people are politically naive. They don't really know what's going on. And so they don't like what Trump's doing, so they're going to vote for Democrats. I mean, you have to know what the political affiliation really is. It's not just the Democrats are the nice party. They don't do anything except take your money, and they say they're going to give it to poor people, but all they do is get people dependent on the party. So they create a systemic voters that will always vote for them because of the free stuff. And as people still get marginalized, and they keep going back to the party or back to political campaigns and go, we need more free stuff because the free stuff you gave us last time isn't lasting. We need more free stuff. DJ Media, State Department, Cuban regime confirmed secret talks in Havana. Both Marco Rubio himself and deputy level officials, but not Marco Rubio himself, are going to meet down with the communists down in Cuba to strike a deal. I hope that works out as well. Again, this was a long festering problem since the 50s. Longer than Iran and the Revolutionary Guard and all that shit. The Islamic Republic. Longer than that. We've had the communists down on Cuba, which unfortunately have been exploited by different communist regimes, the Soviets, and now the Chinese. Last article up here is Zero Hedge. Use the momentum the EU moves to destroy the last vestiges of national sovereignty. And as I said previously, what is this about? This is about both what the Democrats are trying to do here domestically, but the globalists are trying to do here, particularly in the Soviet Union. In the European Union. Might as well be the Soviet Union. The defeat of Viktor Orban in Hungary last weekend was celebrated by many who saw the former president as establishing a single-party rule in an essential European nation. The irony is that this claimed victory for democracy may fuel the establishment of a global governance system that is neither democratic nor accountable to the citizens. And if you know anything about the European Parliament, you know that although your representatives are voted for in the country, it's not very democratic the way the European Union works. The European Union was criticized by many for taking sides in the Hungarian election and for undermining Orban, who asserted national priorities in the disputes with the EU. No sooner had Orban conceded defeat than a jubilant European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen called for a final coup de grace for the national identity and sovereignty, the elimination of the ability of nations to stand against EU policies. You see, the European Union, the countries that make up the European Union would retain veto power, which means that any nation, if it wasn't unanimous, could say, I'm not going for that. And that's what Hungary did with this unlimited borrowing and spending on the war against Russia. However, the unintended consequence of this election could be the removal of a single autocrat in favor of a global bureaucracy. And that's what we're facing, not only here in the United States, but globally. is the corporate concerns and the WEF and the rich individuals want to put in place a bureaucracy fashioned after the Chinese Maoist communism, to put that into place on a global government scale. And that's what the EU is kind of the incubating of a global government that we're see not just in the EU, but that's the way it would work, and then governed over by the United Nations. Van der Leyen helped elect the pro-EU Peter Magyar in order to remove a barrier to the EU's ultimate exercise of power. The EU had been squeezing Hungary over its defiance by holding back billions in funds. Despite his tough talk on negotiations with the EU, Magyar is expected by EU bureaucrats to be a suppliant, willing to fall into line with the EU agenda. I think that's part of my wife's family. Hungarian, if I recall correctly. Sure. All right, we went a little long there. What was it, hour and 15? Hour and 16 minutes, so I'm going to let you go right now. Thanks for joining me today. Don't forget to engage the channel, like, subscribe, leave a comment. Share this live stream. I appreciate you. Don't forget you're under attack psychologically and biologically. Stay hip to the trick. Join me every day, Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. live stream on Rumble, YouTube, X. And join me tonight, possibly for Tuesdays with Perry. We'll see if we can all get together and make that happen. Thanks again for joining me today. Peace out and respect.
These people are crazy.
The New World Order.
Less than 3% of you people read books.